Hello, everybody. It's Holger Müller from Constellation Research. Welcome to Constellation TV episode number 4. A great number because there's no confusion between 1, 2, 3. Like count to 1, 2, 3, Liz?
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
But what? You did 3 like this and not 3 like this?
1, 2, 3.
This? What?
Did you not just hear my impeccable use of the 3 words I know in the German language?
You master the German language. No wonder, okay? So, what do I do at Constellation? I cover future of work and next generation applications. What do you do at Constellation, Liz?
Oh, other than causing trouble with my friend Holger, I cover the world of the CMO marketing, and then I take a freaky left turn and go cover cybersecurity. But listen, we're your anchors today for this episode, and we're really happy to be here. Joining us later in the show are going to be our colleagues Diane Hinchcliffe and Nicole France. We're going to kind of dig in and look at the world of work, not only just looking at work, but we're also going to look at the future of leadership. So we're going to get that in just a few minutes. In every episode, you're going to hear from our analysts, our community of business experts and leaders, and cutting-edge vendors, as well as some of our influencer friends.
As in every show, we'll talk about the top industry news that kicked off 2021 last week and leading into this week.
And we're also going to do a little bit of a follow-up from 2 mega events that went virtual. We got CES, we got NRF, the big retail show, and then we've also got Davos coming up. So you're going to get a little we're going to get a little update on that.
Davos.
It was my tongue couldn't get around the pronunciation. I'm there.
Once, but not twice, my dear Liz.
So we're gonna have some new features coming up in another episode. But first, let's dig into the news. Hey, Holger, what has happened as we kicked off 2021?
A lot of things have happened, but let's look at the last week, right? The big thing last week was that Intel replaced its CEO and brought back the prodigal son, right? I was saying the current CEO wasn't going nowhere, but also Pat Gelsinger, the CEO of VMware, was not going anywhere at Dell. So he's coming back to where he was. He was one of the youngest executive assistants to the founders and so on. So someone who's a chip engineer comes back at the helm of Intel, and we can only hope he has work cut out that he will be able to write that chip. He had some good news last week that his 7 nanomillimeter new architecture might be working. The big question is, will Intel be able to produce it for everything? But Intel really, in my view, Liz, is a great example of a technology company who does not manage to get its second leg. Right? The history of Intel is littered with people, with investments applying into telephony, into cars, self-driving cars, whatever. And pretty much everything which makes kind of like sense was an investment of Intel, but they're all kind of like petered out and they're back at maybe they faltered and got distracted about their main business with chips. What was the biggest news for you last week? Just one by one interactive here. What do you think?
I'll be honest, some of the biggest news has actually been kind of similar to what you saw. It's kind of the shuffling of the deck, right? We had a lot of big CMO moves in the last couple of weeks.
Oh, really?
We've seen some big hires. We got Julia White taking on the CM. She's actually going to be Chief Marketing and Solutions Officer at SAP. So that's a big role. We got Sally Jenkins, who's taken on the CMO role. She used to be CMO at Informatica. Now she's going to go over and she's been tapped to drive growth over at Elastic. So that's a big move. But then let's not forget Sarah Franklin, kind of early in January, getting the nod to be the new CMO over at Salesforce. So we got a lot of moves.
CMO job in the industry, right? With a CEO who has never stopped being a CMO at heart, right?
Right. When you are going to take on that role, you've got to be ready to drive growth. And what's so interesting about that move for me is that Sarah, let's not forget the last time we saw Sarah, right? She was driving platform, driving Trailhead. You got a lot of moves that are happening there. But what's so interesting, you got a lot of product marketers taking on that top spot, right? Gone are the days of trying to make big brands. Gone are the days of gelling culture. We're there. We got there. We're going to start seeing some big moves at IBM. I think we're going to see a lot of shifts where product marketing is going to start to take the lead because that's where the growth is happening. Look at Salesforce, perfect example. You're going to have an engineer who arguably has the best arms in technology. Listen, I'm not mad at Sarah, but I'm kind of mad at Sarah when she's got the workout guns going, and I don't hate her for it. But here's what I will say. all of these marketers have been driving growth, and they've been driving growth through platforms. So I think it's going to be a really good year for developers. It's going to be a really good year for the citizen developer, and it's going to be a really good year for product marketers. So it's going to be super interesting.
Especially Salesforce, right, which has used to be always a sales company. Right? I originally come from the CM space. Sales vendors beating the service vendors, right? Think of the time back of Siebel and Aurum beating Scopus, Clarify, Ventive, right? So sales has won. Salesforce was always sales last year. Service overtook sales, and then platform, of course, fueled by a few acquisitions, right? Yeah. I mean, Salesforce will have spent $50 billion, the combination of Slack closes for Slack, Tableau, and MuleSoft. Unbelievable. No wonder that happens, right?
So, I mean, huge growth. And
also,
hey, Sarah's done a big job.
Do you see our notes here that IBM Chief Marketing Officer Michelle Peluso has joined CVS Health? So that's
and you know what? It's a great spot for her. You know, she grew an incredible brand when she was certainly with brands like American Express, and at IBM she brought a whole lot of rigor into that brand operations. But I think even with IBM, you're going to start to see a real need to pull that product marketing rigor back into the center of that sales enablement approach. I think that we're going to get back to B2B marketing really being that growth driver, that revenue driver. And I think that's something that's really important, but it's going to rely on a lot of workplace and a lot of workspace collaboration, which I know was also at the center of a big acquisition last week.
Right. On the SAT side, right, the balloons are gone, right?
Well, yeah.
Google stops Project Loon, right? The hope to bring internet to the difficult areas where there could be no internet, and the balloons are gone, right?
The balloons are gone.
Yeah, you know, so unfortunately it fell, maybe, I don't know if it never worked or so, but such a great vision and such a great hope. But I'm somewhere with no access on the Amazonas River, right? Or biking Latin America or Africa or something, and then you look up and say, why do I have this great internet access? Oh, there's the balloon, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of those types of moves this year. I think, but here's what makes me happy about these moves, right? Because it actually recenters and refocuses chief marketing officers back onto what we're supposed to be driving, which is revenue. I don't care if you're a B2B or a B2C CMO, you're driving revenue, full stop. And so I think that we're seeing a lot of attention brought back to that, which I think is kind of awesome. But it's also recentering some businesses like, hey, there's some big moves happening at SAP. Right. Getting a new great CMO, but I understand there's some acquisition rumors underway.
Yeah, there's this ever dynamic area of process mining, right? And SAP just has snapped up Scenario, right, as a bolt-on to the intellectual property capabilities in the process mining space. But talking about SAP, right, big news this week with the first time never seen before Rise event, right? Not Rise the food, but Rise Up, right? Which will have an interesting focus, and it's going to be really interesting to see how Christian Klein, the CEO, is going to position that, because everybody knows they have to move the herd, the massive part of customers, to use S4HANA, and the value proposition isn't right? So the big question is, will this be like the one-time push event with free reports and one time you go there, or is going to be, as he seems to be positioning it, as a realization from ERP vendors, there has to be continuous transformation. It's not this one-time thing that happens, right? The great association with SAP is like liquid cement or concrete, right? So it's great as long as you keep it warm and keep it churning and so on. But at some point you have to build something, and then you need a sledgehammer and protective goggles in the head to move things away and change things, right? And that changing part will be an interesting perspective in that industry. We'll see what happens at Rise this week.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, I think some of the changes at SAP have been super interesting, especially when I start to look on the marketing and the customer experience side of things. And I think that that's where, honestly, Holger, where I get most excited about SAP is how do we bring some of that message of what is capable with something like S4 for HANA into as the underlying foundation of everything we're trying to do with our customer. There seem to be some kind of disjointed messages there, but I think that with bringing Julia on board, you're going to start to see a lot more cohesion and a lot more of that kind of thread of what it really is going to mean to be that platform come through. So I think that's really exciting.
But let's keep in mind, right? CMOs have the toughest job. They have the shortest tenure. It's a very
our tenure's grown.
We wish all those CMOs lots of luck, lots of long tenure, right? But
you haven't gotten the memo, Holger. Our tenure's up to 44 months.
44.
44 months, my friend.
We have to ask Diane later. How long is the CIO? You might be getting ahead now.
I know. Well, we're definitely beating the CISO. So I mean, I guess we're ahead there. But listen,
especially in the age of SolarWinds and other stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that kind of brings us to a really great point to actually start to talk about some changes that are happening in other parts of the industry. And we've tapped our friend Ray to give us a bit of a update on not only two shows that are actually really important to the industry, because not only on the consumer side of things does CES start getting us out in what's forward, but then we start to look at NRF, which is the National Retail, the giant show there. So let's spin it over to Ray.
Hey everybody, I want to give you 3 big updates. We've been talking about CES, which occurred earlier in January, NRF, which follows, and of course, what's going on at the Davos agenda. Normally, around this time, I would be freezing my butt off, hanging it out in Davos, as Holger calls it, and actually probably that's the rest of the world calls it the proper way. More importantly, we're talking about what's happening around the world, the big macro issues and the trends. But let's take a step back. Let's start with CES. CES this year was the place to be, mostly because a lot of folks were going to attend Davos. So they actually put a lot of marketing budgets behind CES. We saw everything from healthcare being front and center stage, thinking about what that post-pandemic look would be like, but also talking about really cool innovations. We're seeing it from autonomous vehicles and cars. You saw a lot of companies were announcing cars. The Sony car was back. There's rumors about Apple in a car, building with Hyundai. More importantly, heads-up displays, changing of virtual reality, augmented reality. They all played a big role. The important areas with CES were machine learning, thinking about AI advancements, what was going to happen. We also saw what was going on with environmental themes, thinking about what you had to do for clean energy, sustainability, circular economy, and even climate. And of course, a lot of electric and autonomous vehicle updates that were going on. But we also saw some improvements in mini LED and what was going on with new displays. We saw a lot of flexible displays last year. This year, we saw 8K mini LED become like the focus and attention, and driving down the cost and performance ratio of those. And then, of course, not only in the display technologies, we're also seeing augmented reality, extended reality continue, definitely in the consumer advertising space. And then, of course, we also saw more use cases with connected devices and digitization supporting new types of business models. So that's what happened at CES. And yes, it's a bummer. People really miss meeting up, but of course, hopefully it will be done safely next year. On the NRF side, it was a little bit different. NRF actually spent a lot of time talking about the bigger issues post-pandemic, thinking about what happens to retail and commerce in a post-pandemic environment. And we saw a lot of stuff. We finally understood why supply chain and commerce and digital business models all have to come together. And that is the power, right? And a lot of conversations really thinking about how does that work, right? If you don't have availability, who cares? No one's going to buy anything. If you're trying to sell something that doesn't exist and you can't deliver, who cares? That finally sunk in to a lot of folks who are in this. I mean, most of the time we typically see silos, right, inside of retail and commerce environments. But I think the pandemic solved that, and the need to move to digital actually picked it up. So supply chain investments are up. We're also seeing digital channel investments definitely up, but also the monetization models. You're going to hear a lot about that from my new book, but it's ads, it's search, it's goods, it's memberships, it's subscriptions. These are all part of that whole ecosystem around monetization. And if you're just trying to beat Amazon on commerce, you've missed the point. It's about complete digital monetization. It's about delivering the last mile. It's about setting those expectations. That ease of use, that frictionless capability is so important. And of course, it's another piece that's big is payments, trying to figure out how to manage the payment universe. That's going to be a larger piece. All right, so quickly, I don't have that much time left. I'm going to move to Davos. So let's talk about Davos and talk about what's going on here. A big conversation, the one that they missed last year, is about COVID-19 and what the economic recession is. Unfortunately, not a lot of time spent on figuring out what happened, how did we miss this, but a lot of time talking about, what does this mean? How does it include the economy? What's the situation? How are vaccines being pushed out? How are vaccines being delivered across the world? That is going to be a big piece. The second piece is really what happens. There's a lot of conversation about inequality and the environment, right? picking off from last year with Greta talking about the climate crisis. But you're going to see a lot of investments in climate, and you're going to see that pick up for a lot of reasons, mostly because the U.S. is now again aligned with what the rest of the world is thinking about climate. And that's going to play a big role. I also think the other piece that you're going to spend a lot of conversations about is there's been a lot of conversation, a rampant conversation against shareholder capitalism, a push towards stakeholder capitalism. You're going to see more of that in those conversations. I think it's going to change how industry looks to the future. I hope it doesn't make things worse for everyone else. There are two sides to that issue, and we'll debate that at some other point. But that's what's going on at Davos. It's digital. It's not that exciting. Unfortunately, people really can't participate, engage in it. You're just going to watch the videos afterwards. But Davos is really about the conversations, the networking, the ideas, the discussion points, the random serendipity of bumping into someone. Hopefully that comes back. I know they're doing something in Singapore. Hopefully that doesn't get canceled. And if that's there, I will be there. So, all right, that's the wrap up. And we'll take it back to Holger and Liz.
And next up, we'll have my colleague Darren Hinchcliffe on his never-ending quest. He's kind of like Parzival, the knight in search of the holy grail of the future of work. Don't miss this.
So the last day or so, we've been here at the RV trying to get some work done, and some strange things have been happening on the network. We have a great connectivity setup. It's not the network. I think it's my laptop. I think it's been compromised, and I wonder what we're going to do about that. I'm going to call my friend Steve Herbst. He has a startup portfolio of some interesting companies, including security firms that I think can get to the bottom of my issue, because I think something strange is happening. So I'm going to give Steve a call, and let's see if we can sort this out. So I called Steve for help, and he quickly connected me to the security startup CyberStellar and their founder, Amy Way.
Hi, Amy. Nice to meet you. My good friend Steve Herbst told me that you might be able to help me. The difficulty I'm running into is I'm here on the Citrix RV today, and I'm getting interesting alerts. I think something is going on my network, and I was wondering if you guys could get into my network and tell me what's going on.
Absolutely. We'll be glad to help you.
Amy then put me on with her top cybersecurity engineer, Snehal, who found some very interesting issues with our network and my laptop specifically. Fortunately, he was able to help us out.
Diane, thanks for reaching out. What I want to show you are maybe some critical security events that are happening in your network that may be playing part to some of the things that you're seeing. So let me take a quick look at my dashboard, Diane, and see what I can find. I do see there's possibly ransomware on your network. As you can see, I've got one of my most critical events here on the right here, which is ransomware. And then there's also some tunneling activity that's going on in your network, Diane.
No, that's fascinating. So, and again, very worrisome. I'd like to be able to do something about this. Do you guys have a way of helping manage this once you detect this activity?
Yeah, we sure can. So let's take a look at that event again. Now that I've validated it, that this is a critical event, and I can go ahead and the very first thing I can do is simply send an email message or open up a trouble ticket. But what I can also do is go ahead and go to my firewall and block that traffic.
So we had good news in the end. Snehal was able to rapidly quarantine the situation and help me get back to work. It's amazing the kind of digital tools we have now to keep us safe. What do you get when you mix one big purple RV and one industry analyst, writer, and futurist with remote work and a road trip? Well, you get a lot of fun. We had an amazing time here at the Citrix RV. Thank you to them for letting us spend a couple days here trying out a bunch of interesting things, and I think the experiment was a great success. We'll be sharing it on the Future of Work reality show. You'll be seeing lots more about it in the next few weeks.
Diane, wow, life is getting nuts in the Citrix Airstream. I'm telling you, thanks for taking us all along for that ride. And it's kind of the perfect intro to this discussion we want to talk into, because we want to talk a little bit and maybe dig into work a little bit more. And, not all work at an Airstream. We can't all be with our families, in the Citrix Airstream. We're all a little jealous, but
maybe we should, though. I mean,
maybe we should. Yeah. the next Constellation, retreat, we'll all head out there. But listen,
RV rodeo. It's going to be amazing.
Awesome. It'd be great. Yeah. It'd be great. Listen, let's dig into work a little bit. And I think when we all talk about the future of work, and I know it is a topic that is near and dear to all three of your hearts, I think we tend to talk about it from a couple different perspectives. And so that's what we wanted to get into today. So we've got Diane, our resident CIO and expert in future of work, right? We've got Holger, who takes the decidedly HR perspective on all things work. And then we've got Nicole, who I asked to join us today because when it comes to playing a team sport, you got to figure out how to work that team so that everyone's playing the same game. So that's why we're all here. Let's go ahead and dig in. And so, Diane, I'm going to ask you the first question. And listen, this is meant to be a debate. So, feel free to just tick people off and see where Holger goes. It's going to be fun.
I will do my best.
I like it. Listen, Diane, tools are cool, right? And I think we all love having them. We all love having all the things that make our lives easier and make all of this actually work. But leadership is essential. Right. And I think as we've gone through the pandemic, we've seen maybe some of those leadership skills take a back seat as people have been really focused on getting the tools and the technology right. But arguably, I'm hearing a lot of C-suite leaders start to talk about that how we manage and how we lead again. So do we have the right leadership skills today to actually ensure that these teams that we're empowering with all these great tools are actually going to get to this future of work?
Well, I mean, work has been changing steadily since the arrival of all this technology in our workplace. There's no question that it's shaping how we lead, how we manage, how we guide our organizations. And the big challenge is it's not just making our lives easier anymore. It's essential. Technology is essential in operating our businesses. All we have is our digital employee experiences these days. Unless you're an essential worker out in the field, by and large, your employee experience is almost entirely digital. And no, we don't have the leadership skills for this. Almost all of our managers and executives are trained in a world where you physically lead. You do this in person. You do this in your meeting rooms. You might even do this on a phone conversation, but you don't digitally lead. And so we do see that executives are having a tremendous struggle leading their organizations through a Wi-Fi connection because that's what most of them have been reduced to. And they don't have the skills for collaboration and communication and mentorship. And inspiration and influence and all the things you're supposed to do as a leader. They don't know how to do that in a very scalable way. Digital tools allow you to do incredible things in terms of you can connect to your whole organization and all of your customers all at the same time. But executives, except for it's interesting leading ones, like you look at Richard Branson, Elon Musk, and others have been very successful at engaging with their constituencies, but they're the exception rather than the norm. They use digital tools very well, and we can look to top executives for examples today, which is great, but most of us aren't there yet. So we need to teach skills, what I call network leadership, how you can at scale collaborate, communicate, inspire, influence, and engage with your organization and all your stakeholders. And yes, we need to do that, more of it right now.
I just add though, one of the things that's interesting and challenging about that, Diane, is that a lot of those leaders that you mentioned there, and Elon Musk is probably the one that tops the list, are not necessarily known for doing things with social media that their corporate leadership would necessarily, or certainly their PR and comms leadership is always happy about. So I think part of the challenge from that perspective is that they're really leading as individuals, both within their organizations and publicly. And that sometimes leads to a few broken eggs. Whether that's a bad thing or not is probably a wholly different.
I would say, is that a bad thing? I mean, we're supposed to show displays of absolute leaders when everyone knows that we're not perfect, right? So
yeah,
let me with something which defines us, which in my view is digital literacy, right? How adept is a leader with the digital tools which are available? And that depends also a lot what kind of organization you're in. The typical one-place organization, everybody in headquarters, one location, relies much more on traditional ways of communicating and leading than, say, a global organization where no single member of the executive boards resides physically on design or by purpose in the same location, who are used to do video conference, whether video conference, the old equipment at home already anyway, right? So I think there's a huge difference in digital literacy, which I think is the key factor in showing how well somebody is doing. The real challenge, though, is not on the executive level, because most companies are in multiple locations. The real challenge is on the first and second level of management, which usually is local. they face the big differences of mastering the technology for the first time, of using that, of communicating with their bosses in a different way. So that's where I see the bigger challenges, which really matter for an enterprise productivity and acceleration and adoption to the new normal, to say the bad word one more time.
There's literacy and then there's fluency, right, Holger? I mean, it's degrees of expertise.
A lot of people think they know what they're doing when they get onto something like social. I think that Elon is a great example of that. But is it necessary leadership? Is the whole team happy? Is there a bi-directional communication? Is there real community? I think it raises a whole lot of questions. And cool, I think it actually comes back to something I wanted to ask you, right? Because when we're talking about CX, we're talking about this as a team sport. We're talking about everyone needs to get involved in it, right? But I think especially when it comes to things like in sales and marketing, we have seen firsthand what happens when you automate that process, right? And so you can put in a whole lot of automation.
Yep.
And you can have a lot of tools that help you get there better. But are we going to start to see a revolt? Like, are we going to start to see a whole lot of tools put in place that don't take into account how people actually want to use them? Is it going to become like another CRM, Salesforce automation, I have to collaborate with these tools kind of moment?
I think actually what we're seeing is the opposite. So we've tended to have this to this point. I mean, I would argue, and I have in the past, that frankly, a lot of business applications have been designed for managers and for leaders and not for the people actually using them. And I think what we've really started to see over the last several years, and it's been very much accelerated in the last year because these have become such crucial tools, are actually applications that are designed for the people using them. So things that are designed to help salespeople do their jobs. Digital assistants, for example, are a big one. I mean, most salespeople I've ever worked with tend to prefer doing something on their phone. Mobile or otherwise. And so the fact that we're seeing digital assistants that leverage that innate, voice interaction or text interaction ability are actually changing the game. They're much more closely aligned to the innate way that salespeople want to work, for example. At the same time, we're also seeing some really significant changes. So one area that I think is a very interesting portender of things to come is simpler, which is a gig-based approach to customer service. They're not going to take over all of customer service, but what's really interesting about that is they're taking off pieces of that, specifically the pieces that are text-based. So these are people who are essentially independent contractors who work through an app. They're answering queries, customer queries for a bunch of different kinds of customers in the same working session. And they're doing that because the tools make that possible. And because the workspace that's been created for those experts, as they're not called agents, is really designed to make them as effective as possible. And so that means making sure they've got access to the right information, they're plugged into the organizations they're serving, and they're getting the queries that they can answer effectively. And the other queries are going back to the in-house customer service teams. So I think, in fact, what we're seeing is a really significant move, much more toward applications and tools that are designed for the way people already work, and therefore are improving their ability to do those jobs, especially in an environment where we're just not in the same office anymore.
I feel like this is Holger's land. Like, it's like next gen apps and HR coming together. Oh my God, Holger, go for it.
Well, this is a unique chance for what often is called the chief people officer to really step up for the people, right? Which they traditionally have not done, which is looking at the whole thing, tooling, setting of the people in the enterprise. And this is an easy new start of reasserting themselves as chief people officer, because everybody's working from home, from laptop, understanding, figuring out if you pay for the internet connection, if you pay for the laptop, for the screen, and so on. This is like core HR parts. So this is a chance of really becoming back chief people officer. But inside of the HR automation, I mean, really the important things are, you have to find a better way for succession management in an operational way. People getting sick, taking care of loved ones, having to take time off. You have to understand much more fluidly what's happening in the organization. You have to understand much better where your talent is as you're moving talent around. Nicole mentioned as a word, the gig part, right? Companies don't scale in natural number and integer numbers, right? I have to find internal opportunity marketplaces, internal gig marketplaces where I can find people helping each other on this new digital fabric across the whole enterprise. That would be the top things coming to mind.
Okay, guys, we're going to close this out. One word answer, lightning round. Ready? Okay. Future of work is Diane.
Engagement.
Nicole.
I'm saying federated.
Ooh.
Unword engagement, right? No, future of work is more exciting than ever.
That's not one word.
Not one word, Holger.
No, one word.
More exciting than ever. And
no, one word.
Medieval.
Okay, that's it, guys. Thanks for joining this debate. It was awesome. See you guys next time.
Bye.
Okay, so we'll start going. We'll just do this a bit. There we go. Okay.
Why do we need a script?
Hey, Elle, does that pretty much tell you where we ended that segment?
Yeah, that was great.
I'm so glad you didn't call him Don Quixote.
Don Quixote is not so good as an example.
I thought we were going down
Don't
the
think it's
Princess
right.
Bride route.
In the future, it'll
Right,
work.
we can do that, but I call him Parcel.
I thought we were going to go down the Princess Bride route.
So good.
All right.
Oh,
I think we're good. We can end broadcast. We'll be all right here. Pop
great.
this.